Welcome to the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast.
Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast. With me this week is Matthew Shifrin, CEO of Pioneer Interests. Thank you very much for joining me today, Matthew.
Pleasure to be here, David. Thank you.
Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach me at david@cannabisequipmentnews.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You could also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. So I always like to start with a little bit of background, Matthew. What was it that brought you to cannabis?
It's a great question, David. So I was originally had backgrounds in energy drinks, finance for half a second, ended up working in healthcare for a while. And then I really got my chops in the spirits industry, alcohol, liquor, mainly in craft bourbon. So I ended up taking a handful of craft distilleries and scaling them from small mom and pop businesses into national or global operators throughout the country. And what I learned about that industry, as well as like healthcare, is authentic brands require authentic people to really scale them up and to build them. It's the authentic people that built them in the first place, right? And if you don't carry or bring those people along with you, you're not going to be successful at the end of the day. What we saw in the cannabis industry, what drew us to it were really two things. I would say first was I actually had a brother who passed away of a heroin overdose, and my wife actually dealt with a lot of mental health issues, and so we knew that cannabis was a much better alternative to obviously plenty of things that are out there. The second was really leveraging all the skills and expertise that we had developed from at least my experience in spirits and healthcare and energy drinks, and applying it to this industry and knowing that, okay, if you bring the authentic people who really built these brands, built these businesses to begin with, teach them the skills that are, from traditional corporate America or process manufacturing and all of that, and you implement it into the cannabis industry, you can be wildly successful, and it's a growth opportunity. So actually, I was living back in Colorado where I originally grew up, and set our sights to it. And so we started out with a couple of stores. We actually started with 3 stores and 1 small grow. And today, Pioneer, through its brands, Natty Rems on our wholesale side and Lova on the retail side, we're one of the largest suppliers and manufacturers and sellers of flower, live resin cartridges, and live rosin, as well as one of the largest premium retailers in the state as well.
I mean, that is an incredible story. And I mean, it actually hits really close to home for me too, just because regarding the brother with the heroin addiction and the wife with anxiety issues. So feeling you 100% there. One thing with the cannabis industry is that sometimes when it comes to expertise coming from other fields, a lot of times those people are treated like an outsider. And when you're talking about the importance of authenticity, did you feel that sort of pushback as an outsider initially?
Yes and no. I think that a lot of the people that we really ended up working with and gravitating towards were those that knew their skill, knew their craft, but were and wanted to grow, but it sort of reached the upper limits of how they were able to grow, right? And they were looking for partners that were going to help steward them or their businesses or their teams into that sort of next evolution, right? Of course, plenty of people who would be like, who the hell are you? And what do you know? And I'm always the first to admit, I have literally no idea what I'm doing, right? I mean, we're even 7 years in, and it's funny now when I go to new markets like in Illinois or Missouri and other places, they're like, oh, we're legacy. And I'm like, I'm legacy? I'm not legacy. Like, but now that I've been in, on a couple of tours of duty here, you realize you learn everything through experience. I think what's important to note about cannabis is, of course, there are unique attributes to this industry that do not exist in plenty of other industries in the world, right? Like the federal challenges that we deal with, not being able to use NetSuite as an ERP system, just not being able to use credit cards. There's plenty of challenges that cannabis operators deal with every single day in the trenches, and it's awful. But then there are a lot of things in the cannabis industry that are very similar to other businesses, right? At the end of the day, we're farmers, we're manufacturers, we're retailers, we're consumer product salespeople. that's it. That's it's business, right? And when you appreciate that there are similar parallels that you can take advantage of and learn from and apply to this industry, it ends up being sort of that silver bullet that you were always looking for. So yeah, I think there were some people that we had some resistance, but I think the majority of people that we ended up working with were really looking for how do we get to the next step, the next level.
When you first started, did any of those challenges make you think twice about your decision to get into the industry?
Um, No, I think at that point, to be honest, we were just so excited and kind of like just drinking from a fire hose in all sorts of different directions. I think where certainly there were some hard looks in the mirror. I mean, Colorado, for example, the retail category in this market has gone down almost 52% in the last 3 years. We've gone from a $2.3 billion industry, almost 2.4, to a $1.3 billion industry. The wholesale commodity went from an average price per pound of 16.50, 3 years ago, to now we sit right around 7.50 a pound. So we've gone through this massive transformation. So there have been plenty of hard days in the mirror as the category was falling off, where it's like, man, did we make the right decision getting into this business? But no, I think in terms of what brought us here in the first place, of the opportunity, the benefits of cannabis, the true growth potential, all of that still exists, and it's frankly what gives us our third, fourth, fifth wind all the time. And I say we as a team, but I think that really resetting your expectations of what it takes the time wise to really build a successful business. It's not the 3 to 5 year flip. It's 10 years to be an overnight success, and then frankly I'll talk to you at year 20, right? So we're still babies in this, frankly, in a lot of different ways, but we're learning how to walk, I would say.
As part of this 20-year journey, are you growing mostly organically, or is it a little bit of M&A as well?
That's a great question. So it's pivoted, and I think that's kind of the cool part. So we started with M&A. We then started doing some greenfield, and new locations, especially in Colorado. We ended up winning 5 licenses in Illinois, 3 retail and 2 craft grow. Opened up our first store there back in June of 2023, and so we had the same ambitions as many people, right? We want to be multi-state operators. We want to take what we've built and spread it out and grow as quickly as possible. And I would always say, David, we don't grow at any cost, right? We're extremely methodical about what we're doing. But it turns out we were probably not as match fit to expand into another state as we really expected to be. And what I really learned is in a growth industry like cannabis, crypto, solar panels, AI, whatever it is, you either have to be super early or frankly super late. And if you're in the middle, man, you're probably in for a pretty tough time, right? Because there's this pop up and it can be a bit of a drop. In Colorado, when we got into the industry, we were at the end of early, right? Which means we were at the beginning of the middle. When we opened up our store in Illinois, I realized like, oh my God, we are smack dab in the middle, smack dab. And so we ended up selling out our Illinois portfolio, and we're doubling down our resources into Colorado because we think that Colorado is much later in the cycle, if not latest in the cycle.
Was part of it, a lot of times I hear about the difficulty of being a multi-state operator. Essentially, you're running 2 separate or however many separate businesses. Were the logistics part of the problem?
Logistics, actually, funny enough, were not as much of the problem as you would expect, right? You'd think like, oh, banking is going to be more challenging, or certain resource partners. You're absolutely right. It is running different businesses. So, even in Colorado, we run a cultivation business, we run an extraction business, we run a, wholesale business. You could even throw production in the middle there, right? And then we run a retail business. So, just in that, we have what was probably too big to chew early on, right? When we first got into this, then opening up in Illinois. Absolutely, right? Because now you actually have entirely different suppliers that you're purchasing in different SKUs, different customer in terms of like the maturity of that customer, not from a I would say experience of that consumer in terms of purchasing products, right? They're early in the cycle of realizing recreational cannabis, and so their palates haven't developed, their expertise hasn't gotten there as far as consumers in Colorado, California, Oregon, Washington, and some of these earlier markets. So that is really the challenge, I would say, is having to learn all that. And if you're doing it in a way that is, I would say, in to answer your first question, more organic, versus like, hey, I raised a huge war chest, I'm going after multiple markets, here's my multiple markets team to go and accomplish that. I was really expecting that, man, I can really franchise or utilize my existing Colorado operations and team to really support that expansion, that campaign. And we were wrong, right? It is much more of a each market is its own country, and so you have to be cognizant of that. And I think that's one of the challenges that a lot of these multi-state operators have, when you look at their cost of doing business, right? They're from a P&L perspective, a lot of them have these huge corporate overhead. And as a small business operator, you're like, how can they spend this much money on cost doing business? But then you realize, like, you really do need separate teams in all these markets in order to accommodate the challenges that you're going to experience.
So is the idea to keep investing or doubling down in Colorado, or do you kind of have your eyes open for when that new market opens up and getting in early?
It's a great question. I'm in this for now. I've reset my lens, right? My focus is 10 years is going to be the first part. The next 10 years is going to be the second part. So is my long-term answer, do I still have multi-state ambitions? Absolutely. Right. This to me feels like a retreat, regroup, grow, and then reattack. The truth is, though, we see so much opportunity in a market like Colorado, right? Valuations are extremely depressed, more depressed than when I got in the market in 2017, 2018. And we know this market, right? We know it extremely well. We've also gone through what I believe is the end of the retail and commodity declines, right? We've already actually been in almost a year plus commodity upswing now, where the market pricing has come back. I mean, there was a low point where I was selling pounds for $650, and I was one of the premium wholesalers in the market. We've since come back. Our average is about $987 to $1025 a pound right there. So we sell, still some for $1100, $1200, some for $800, $850. Hopefully not too many of my wholesale customers are watching this, listening. But the truth is that the retail market, we believe, is very well bottomed out. And now we see it that, okay, we can start to methodically grow again. Organically. In fact, we think that the market's oversold at this point. Whereas my concerns are like markets such as Missouri and Illinois. You're seeing it in Michigan and Massachusetts, these kind of markets that are in the middle of their cycle. I expect they've got more decline, unfortunately, that they're going to have to endure before they can kind of come out of that. So my thesis is double down in Colorado, build this thing up, focus purely on just profitability. We want to be the most profitable business in Colorado. We don't want to be the biggest. We want to be the most profitable. And then once that comes to fruition, then, if my thesis is right, I think it'll be a prime buying opportunity in markets like Missouri and Illinois again, where we can start to get out there.
Well, I mean, it sounds like it's working in terms of staying true to your mission. I mean, I read that you're now the third largest grossing brand in Colorado. So I think kind of the stats support your mission.
Yeah, our mission actually as a company, Pioneers, is we grow plants, people, and community. And it ties back to a lot of the questions that you've answered. We believe that we have to develop the best quality products at the best price every single day, or the best retail experience every day. We got to teach our team from within. We got to teach them by showing, not by telling them, right? And grow those authentic, original, operators into, professionalized long-term operators. And then we got to tie the community in, right? Expand our customer base, reduce and eliminate the stigma. Having focused on our mission and being a culture first business for the last almost 7 years now, has, I think, to your point, paid off, right? We've not only survived, we've thrived. We've paid down a tremendous amount of debt. We've, continued to grow our business. We've, We haven't experienced nearly the declines that much of the major market has, at least in those later stage markets. And we're excited about the future. So yeah, I mean, one could argue we're doing something right, but I'm cautious to sort of admit that.
When it comes to achieving those quality goals, what is your approach to cultivation?
It's a great question. So we were actually very early subscribers of 3-Light methodology, but what I realized very early on is, when I first got into the business, I looked at about 100 grows throughout Colorado and saw everything you could possibly imagine. Right? I mean, it was crazy. And but what I found is there were operators who were growing a lot of yield. But it was sort of mid quality, and then there were a handful of operators that were growing phenomenal quality, but their yields were abysmal. And so we really set out to say, okay, how do we combine these two methodologies together, focusing on quality, but ensuring that we're still achieving 3+ pounds per light in an indoor setting using no pesticides or herbicides, right? So it took us, I kid you not, David, about 2 years in order to achieve that with consistency. And it was a really methodical approach, but I think that our cultivation style really comes down to complementing Mother Nature. Right. So making sure that you're not just cranking the lights on and you're not just blasting these things with our girls with IPM all the time. And you gotta be sensitive. You gotta mirror what they're going to experience in an outdoor setting, but 72 and sunny and perfect relative humidity every day. Right. That's the goal. And a VPD around 1.2%, 1.2. So I would say that our style, complementing Mother Nature, focusing on yields, but making sure that we're hitting it on quality. What that's resulted in for us is I would never say that we're in the 90th to 100th percentile for quality in Colorado, while plenty of people would, and I don't think it's warranted. But I would tell you that we're probably somewhere between the 80th and 90th percentile, maybe 75th on a couple of strains that are just not too exciting, but they dump. But really consistently, we deliver a very high quality product at a value price, and that's and at scale. And my past business experience in spirits and healthcare, it was all about that. It was, how do I take an authentic brand and scale it, right, and deliver that quality, consistency, and reliability to the consumer such that we're able to succeed. So yeah, that's how we do it.
Over those 2 years of fine tuning, can you think of a specific aha moment, or maybe a few along the way, where you really made a big change?
I mean, yeah, the funny thing, I would tell you, there's no silver bullet in farming, right? And when people ask me today what I do, I just say I'm a farmer, right? Because that's so much of our life. And when I talk to and when I say real farmers, but I'm like, I'm a real farmer. But when I talk to guys who, grow cranberries or grow strawberries and stuff, it's like we all have the same problems. It's unique, or it's not unique, rather. It's unique to farming. So the answer, unfortunately, is no real clear aha moments. What I would say is that it's maybe the aha moment, actually, David, was that realizing that the gains that you're going to get are the 3 to 5% improvements that you get at every stage of the value chain along the way, right? So there is no man, we do that and 30% increase. That doesn't exist, right? Sure, nutrients, right? If you were operating liquid nutrients and you went to salt, that was a 90% decrease, 80% in your net nutrient cost. But what I would say is the aha moment was realizing, man, if we could just tweak a little bit there, and we tweak a little bit there, and we tweak a little bit there, all that compounding thus results in achieving those greater yields and greater quality performances and the consistency and reliability that you would expect. That to me, I think, was the biggest aha moment for cultivation.
You've grown a significant portion of the business in the extraction side. When did you get into extraction, and how did that grow?
Yeah, immediately, tragically. So when we were looking at grows in Colorado, so one of my first operators for cultivation in this business for a long time, he was one of the co-founders of the 3-Light methodology in Colorado, and So we were looking at a variety of different grow facilities that we could acquire, and it was difficult because we were trying to find the right size, the right existing genetic portfolio, in production, and there was a window of time that was sort of closing. Right, the market had gotten beat up, the commodity was at its low, but it was starting. You could see to begin to come back. So these grows were sort of becoming less and less available, and we were trying to scale it for where do we want to be at from a store count perspective, right? And where do we want to be from a wholesale perspective as well. Our first grow that we ended up acquiring was a 22,000 square foot facility that was actually the home facility for Natty Rems. And what we loved about it was, one, it was like kind of an open football field in the middle, but it had some perimeter grow rooms already going. It was like 8 flower rooms and 2 veg, and I mean tiny. We're talking like 5,000, 6,000 square feet of canopy maybe, and but it also had BHO extraction. And at the time, it was so funny because when I was raising capital, I was telling people I don't want to touch extraction with a 30-foot pole, right? Because I don't understand it. I'm not a big hash consumer. Like I don't know the products. And it seems like the technology is innovating at such a degree that like you get the wrong business in the wrong spot, and you could really be in a bad spot. I know I can figure out farming. It's more straightforward. Retail, we certainly get, and that seems like two is the right number of vertical businesses to go after. But because this was like the right sweetheart deal for us from a grow perspective, we ended up picking up BHO extraction. So we got into it right off the bat, and yes, we were very fortunate. We really took the same the same methodology in terms of cultivation and applied it to extraction, right? I looked at brands like 710. I'd looked at Cushmasters. I'd looked at a variety of marquee brands in the Colorado market. And what I found was that Natty was the best in terms of achieving what I believed were the quality, needs and the reputation in the market, but the ability to scale. Whereas many of the other brands I was looking at just did not have the scalability, unfortunately. So we loved the genetic portfolio. So we picked up the facility and got into BHO immediately. About 2.5, 3 years ago, we got into SHO in a large commercial way as well. At solventless extraction or rosin and bubble hash for those that don't know. And yeah, and we've been very successful on that. We're Green Dot is the number 1 operator in the market. We're number 2 for Natty Rems, and mostly known for ultra premium quality in 1 gram live resin 510 carts. That's our bread and butter.
With the 3-light methodology, do you use a specific lighting manufacturer?
We've used a bunch over the years, actually. So we've run everything from HPS metal halide and metal halide. We've run, Nanolux and Joules and all sorts of different, ballasts and bulbs. But we've just switched over all of our facilities to LED just over the course of the last year. So we're actually running HLG, which is a great manufacturer. It's all Samsung diodes, and they're manufactured out of Tennessee. Great operators. I can't recommend them enough. But through that process, actually, we also investigated and tested out a bunch of different lights. One of the things that I think would also separate us is we're constantly in one of 2 R&D processes, whether it's equipment or process. Just continuous improvement is one of our core values, and so we've been highly focused on testing out a bunch of different lighting systems over the years, and found that HLG was one of the best. The other ones that I would give a shout out to, though, are IQ Zen. We use them for some supplemental lighting, and have found great success in their fixtures as well.
Well, when it comes to continuous improvement from an operational perspective, that's easier because, that's just day-to-day stuff. But when it comes to the equipment side, you're talking about significant capital investment. When do you, after that R&D phase, when do you pull the trigger on those expenses?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we always fire the bullet first, right? So we fire a test shot. We'll typically, as if we can, fire 2, 3, 4. I mean, as many as the test shots that you can, because you're really, you're getting in your sight, right? And then we fire the cannon. So for us, I would say that from a capital management perspective, we obviously look at, okay, what is the goal? What's the objective? Like right now, we're actually in the process of a pretty massive overhaul of automation in our, sort of downstream production side of the business, right? And so what we do there is we investigate machinery. We look at the types of equipment needs that we have. We also always ask the question, where are we going to be 5 or 10 years from now, right? Because too often there was a terrible time we spent like $75,000 in supplemental fans because I was concerned there was so much during COVID this population move to Denver that I was worried that summer the grid was going to go down and that we would have like these rolling blackouts. So I was like, guys, humidity. We know that humidity is the killer, so we need to be able to purge the humidity out of the room. So we got excess generators and we got these fans ready to go because that was like our pre-mortem for the summer of like the power is going to go out. And I kid you not, maybe 6 weeks after we got all these fans, my director of cultivation at the time was like, "Oh, I want to get these HAF fans, right? And I want to put them up in the canopy." And I was like, "Cool. And how much is that?" And he's like, "Yeah, it's going to be like 75 grand." And I'm like, "Well, didn't we just spend 75 grand on these fans? And oh, by the way, could we hook those up to a different circuit and run a generator?" They're like, "Yeah, we can do that." I'm like, "Great." So in other words, the fans that we now need are the fans we could have used, for supplemental. And so we've learned that lesson, right? We ask ourselves, where are we going to be 5 years? Where are we going to be 10 years from now? Is this the equipment that we need to service that? And then really it's just building it into cash flow, right? And cash flow is for any cannabis business, I don't care, from the biggest to the smallest, it's an issue all of us have, right? And so we've got to be methodical in planning. We press our suppliers extremely hard for terms. We don't take no for an answer, and we really stage things out. And you got to chip away at it. And I think that where you would want to implement everything all at once and be done with it, we don't have that luxury, right? And you've got to just sort of add to it incrementally to make those improvements and plan it out, and then hit it right. So I think that's how we plan it.
As part of this automation overhaul, what's on the table? Is it any process, or are you targeting specific product lines?
Specific product lines. I mean, especially like we're one of the largest wholesalers of joints in the state as well, and just 1 gram cones. So for us right now, it's really automating 100% of that. From the labeling to the packaging, the tubing, and making sure that we're hitting that. Same deal with our cartridges, just every way in which we can automate further levels of production. There's just so many what are they called? When things get clogged.
Bottlenecks.
Bottlenecks. Thank you.
Yeah.
There's just so many different bottlenecks downstream in the production side of things that we've got to get rid of those, right? And it's less of our problem. Biomass we can schedule out 6 months. We know exactly what's going to happen every single day, right? We know from a BHO perspective, pretty much within a couple decimal points exactly the yields that we're going to be getting and when that product's going to be coming down. The issue for us is how do we build that scale of products, make sure that we're delivering it on time, and also be sure that we can do the sort of variety of products that we have. And that's a constant battle internally because I want to produce anything and everything, right? I'm an owner and a dreamer, right? So I'd love to be number one in every category. But from a process manufacturing perspective, you just can't. It's inefficient. So you got to really dial in what it is that you want to produce and scale up in those areas. So that's really what we're focused on. And frankly, a couple of years ago, David, I'll add that we dropped traditional textures. Natty Rems was originally known for being the premier dabbable brand next to Green Dot. And we dropped traditional textures because there was just no way to scale it, right? And it was incredibly consuming from a labor perspective. And that was 12% of our revenue at the time, at a time when the market was still doing its declines. And that was a really tough decision. So where we shifted our focus and our investment into were SKUs that could be further automated, further scaled, and be made more efficient. And those are the areas that we've won, right? So flower, joints, cartridges, especially, and we just see further ability to do more there.
Are a lot of those lines now semi-automated, or are you still doing a fair amount by hand?
I mean, there's still a fair amount by hand, in my opinion, right? I mean, I would love to see Optimus robots in here trimming, if possible, but we'll get there. So I would say, for my preference, there's still a tremendous amount of hand touch on everything that we do, right? So we semi-automated almost everywhere? Yes. Flower, we're not. We're full hand trimmed, but that's just due to the nature of the Colorado market. You have to be if you demand higher premium pounds. But everything else downstream is semi or fully automated in some capacity.
But I mean, if you look at traditional agriculture and where robotics are playing a larger and larger role in harvesting, I don't think it's as far as some people think.
No, I actually think it could be a couple to a few years away, frankly. I mean, even when you look at like you go to MJ Biz and the evolution of joint manufacturing year after year after year, it wasn't a long amount of time from when we were getting Bosch robots from Accelerant, filling joints, right? So case in point, I think that when we look things like, we do 2 heavy defoliations throughout the flower cycle, right? To me, I absolutely believe that a robot can process that and do it more efficient, more consistently. I think that trimming, I'm not joking. I believe that we will have trimming robots, a handful of years out from now. And not only that, there's as you see, if you go look at the tulip manufacturers or flower growers in the Netherlands, they have multi-million square foot facilities, greenhouses, and there's like 3 people working at them, and they're just it's fully automated, right? And I'm pretty sure one guy is a security guard. So it's like. So you're not wrong that much of agriculture at a scaled level can and should be automated and will be automated, for that matter, David. I think it's really just the constraints around capital in the industry create these challenges where, plenty of things in my facility are absolute no-brainers, but I don't have the cash to do it, right? And we'll get to it as soon as we get through this list of things that are a priority.
Well, speaking of capital and that list of priorities, so you guys had really big news December 4th. I want to make sure I have this right. You secured a $500,000 sustainable upgrade loan for Natty Rems facility in Denver. Can you walk us through that process? And, how is this particular funding different than other traditional paths?
That's a great question. Well, first, I'm going to back it up to, So we just actually worked with Safe Harbor Financial, which is one of the best banks out there in the cannabis banking space. And Sunday and John are fantastic people to work with. So I highly recommend them. But we were fortunate to get linked up with Heather Braithwaite, who is the Chief Investment Officer over at the Colorado Clean Energy Fund. This is a 501c3 sort of intermediary who works with the Colorado Clean Energy Office. So they're the state-run organization, and Libby and her team over there are absolutely fantastic as well. But CSEF and the CEO, so Colorado Clean Energy Fund and the Clean Energy Office of Colorado, CEO, they had gotten together and they had said, look, cannabis operators in Colorado account for about 3% of total energy consumption in the state, which is very, very high. There's few other industries that match, even that level of equivalency. And, frankly, it's because they're all running metal halide HPS lights. And in most other markets, Illinois is a perfect example. You are mandated to put LED in day one, right? But in Colorado, we were one of the first industries out there that wasn't an option at the time. And then there's been no subsequent capital investment into the state that would allow for this quick, easy jump into LED. Then came around the IRA, though, the Inflation Reduction Act from the Biden administration, which gave tremendous subsidies to clean energy in an effort to get people to retrofit to green energy or electrification. So with that, a lot of Colorado operators were looking at the LED systems and saying, "Man, we of course we want these. Our bulbs, our ballast are 7 to 10 years old. We're seeing 10% yield declines on an annual basis. We need new lights. The only way to go is LED, but it's $1,100 a fixture, right? And that's just crazy. So we can't afford that." So as a result, the IRA comes around and it's like, oh my God, now we're within grasp of being able to afford these things. But then you're looking at the electrical costs, you're looking at supplemental dehumidification that's required, further fans because you have a huge humidity and an increase in transpiration as a result excuse me, same transpiration, you have reduced heat, right, which thus creates more humidity due to the fact that the LEDs run cooler. So we need more equipment, but again, we don't have the cash. So CSAF and CEO were like, well, hey, we have some reserve funds and we see an opportunity to help cannabis businesses to get them across the line here and get these LED programs installed and get them the additional equipment that they need. So we were actually the pilot program. They worked with a variety of different smaller growers in the state, and unfortunately it didn't work out. And so, CSEF and Pioneer ended up partnering up, and we worked to get this across the finish line with the Colorado Clean Energy Office as well as with Safe Harbor Financial. And just last week we closed this loan for $500,000, 8% interest, 7-year term, so phenomenal terms for a cannabis loan if you think about it, when everybody's in double-digit interest rates, and that's giving us the capital needed to not only complete the LED installation, but also to acquire and install these supplemental systems that are needed to maintain the environments.
Will the funds be distributed prior to the retrofit, or is it something where you have to do the retrofit and then provide receipts?
That's a great question. No, so they'll work in conjunction with the lender, and essentially they can pre-fund, depending on where the timing is of the acquisition of your equipment, or they can fund like a construction loan. They can fund the supplier directly as well, or they can pay you, give you the funds after you've done the install yourself, right? And today in this world, maybe not necessarily on the supplemental dehu side or fans. Those suppliers are less likely to give you accentuated terms, but the LED manufacturers, at least at this point, can work through financing on their end, especially because a lot of them are sitting on the inventory and would rather see it get out the door than not.
Well, I think it's an incredible opportunity, and I honestly, when I was looking at the numbers in terms of how much energy is consumed by cannabis cultivation in Colorado, I found it kind of shocking. It was very surprising. But going through this entire process, was it complicated? It seems like there were a lot of dance partners.
Yeah. I laugh because it actually took a year to get to fruition, to come to fruition. And, the program was announced last year. So as soon as the application came out, I think we were the first one to request it. And kudos to my team to even finding it in the first place. At which point, though, the first bank to sit on it was actually Stearns Bank, which they went through, and the unique nature of this loan, the thing that makes it fascinating is that the state of Colorado is doing what's known as a loan loss reserve, right? So in other words, if we default Pioneer on the loan, the Clean Energy Office will buy down the loan 80%, right, to the bank. In addition, and excuse me, this is CEO and CSAF that are doing this in conjunction with one another. There's also an interest rate buy down, right? So the bank is not lending me the money at 8%. They're actually lending it to me at 12%. But again, CSAF and the state program are buying down that interest rate down to 8%, right? So that's incredible. But even with that, Stearns Bank, when they first, looked at us, and again, David, as we've talked through this conversation, like Pioneer is a pretty established operator in this market, right? We're one of the premier vertically integrated operators in the state. I've got 4 years of audited financials, GAAP audited. We're a pretty clean operation. We didn't qualify. And I, therefore, had to work with CSEF and the CEO to try to move the program over. And that's when we've been a long-term partner of Safe Harbor Financial. We've worked with them since day one of Pioneer's inception, and I brought this to them along with a couple of other partners and said, hey, they're like, we think this is too good to be true. And I'm like, I hear you, but this is the program. And so through a lot of work, a lot of patience, and a lot of perseverance, frankly, I would say just grit, right? We all got there and got across the finish line.
Do you see more of this in the future in making the cannabis industry more energy efficient?
Yeah. So in fact, the program availability is out there now for now that we've, sort of, forgive the pun, but we pioneered it. But now that we've blazed the trail, so to speak, other operators, at least in the Colorado market, are 100% available to pursue this. So they should reach out to Safe Harbor Financial and learn about the program. There's an online application that they'll be able to submit, and they can get access to these funds. 500 is the max. Probably I would say a more average loan size is going to be somewhere between 100 to 250,000. But it depends on the size of your scale and what you're doing. But I would say, David, to answer that second question, absolutely. I mean, if we do see federal reform going from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 over the course of the next call it year, 2 years, then I do imagine that programming is going to become more readily available for cannabis businesses. I was talking to somebody who last night was like, I thought cannabis would be before crypto in terms of, this next phase, this next wave, but turns out crypto was first, but cannabis is coming. And I agree with them. I don't get too excited about any sort of regulatory reform. For me, it's all 10 years out. We'll see. But absolutely, I think programs like this will become more readily available. And frankly, they need to. Cannabis businesses, they consume 10 gigawatts a year of energy in the state of Colorado. It's a huge amount of energy demand. We want to be good stewards. We're good people as well. We don't want to have this negative impact on the environment. It's just by nature of some of the constraints and challenges and roadblocks that have been put in cannabis operators' ways over the course of the last, call it 10 years of this experiment, force us to have to take, the worst path oftentimes.
Well, and I think that the cannabis industry in general doesn't get enough credit from jobs creation and the role it plays on local economies in terms of programs like this being available to help support the industry. And I think that it's kind of been a long time coming.
100%. And I give huge kudos as well to, Governor Polis's administration, everybody at the Colorado Clean Energy Office, for them to have the wisdom and the gumption and courage, right? There's plenty of people in the world that would stigmatize this kind of like support out into the market. And yet they were like, no, this is exactly where it needs to go. These are business operators just like, and remember, I was in spirits, right? So, in post-prohibition, it wasn't cool to be an alcohol, right? You were a bootlegger, you were a former criminal, you were, and now it's sexy. It's like, oh, you're a craft brewer. Oh, you're a craft distiller. Like, yeah, that's sexy. Oh, you own a tequila business? Cool, right? Cannabis still has the stigma of like, oh, you're in weed, and it won't be like that forever. Of course it won't be, right? And so I think the more that destigmatization takes place, the more that innovative leaders like Governor Polis's office or the CEO or CSAF support initiatives like this, the more it'll become normalized for other people as well.
Well, I really do appreciate you taking the time. It's been incredibly beneficial for our listeners. And I hope more people take advantage of programs like this. And, that's what I hope the podcast serves to do, is help people learn from what's working for you and see how they could use it in their own business.
Absolutely. And I think, listen, one of the key takeaways for me is this appeared in the first conversations that I had with CSEF and CEO was, oh, this is a slam dunk. We'll fund you guys in February or March, right? And that was this past year. perseverance pays off, right? PPO, that's kind of our at least my family motto. And you just have to continue to persevere, and you have to realize that, look, with enough time and energy, you'll end up breaking through at the end of the day. And there are people out there outside of the cannabis industry that want to help and work, with those of us that are in it. And it just takes a bit longer, and it's a little bit harder, but it's certainly worth it at the end of the day.
Well, it's a little bit longer, a little bit harder, and you came from other industries. Do you see yourself sticking with cannabis for the foreseeable future, or do you still have that interest or your eyes in potential other positions?
No, I mean, listen, I'm an owner, right? So for me, I don't joke when I say I'm a farmer, right? Like it's my business, it's my team. I'm one of the major shareholders in the company. And so for me, frankly, what you realize, it's really funny. I mean, we were all young at some point, right? Or younger, and we're still young, David. But the truth is that even though you say to yourself, like, no, I'm not in it for the 3 to 5 year flip, like I'm in my dream job, I want to do it, deep down, you're like, yeah, I want that exit, right? Like, that's what I'm looking for. Of course we all do. That there's a reason that we do this. What I've come to realize is that the true dream is having a extremely profitable business that pumps off distributions to its owners on an annual basis and is continuing to grow in equity value, and you don't have a boss, right? Like that's the true dream. And I think that we're now in a position where it took us 6-7 years to learn what the hell we're doing, understand more about the market, get our finances, and our ducks in a row, essentially, to a position where, like, even in its worst environment, this business is profitable, right? And now that we're there, and frankly, we see that many of our peers are tired or are poorly capitalized or didn't put in the hard work over the course of the last couple of years, or just a couple of years behind us. That we have real opportunity to scale now, and scale further, right? So I actually see this as sort of our second act, and the first 7 years was just the first act, right? And so no, I'm fully in on cannabis for a long time. And why not? It's really fun, and it is my dream job, right? We get to grow, we get to produce, we get to sell, we get to retail, and there's certainly any day of the week where I hate any one of those things. There's fact to that, but fundamentally, we get to buy, we get to sell, we get to do it all, right? And it's such an exciting industry, and I think one of the things that is overlooked oftentimes, David, is the passion and excitement of the team that works in this industry, right? Our team members are amazing. I mean, they're super passionate about the craft, the product, the industry, and they're pioneers, right? They said, yeah, I want to work in weed. Many people moved here because they wanted to work in weed originally, right? And you got to love that, right? And you got to support that and want to see those people succeed. And so that's what we're in it for: growing plants, people, and community.
No, coming off of MJ BizCon, it was that injection of that passion. That sometimes it gets to be a long year, and then you jump in and you're like, okay, everyone's still loving it. Everyone's still loving it. It's a good place to be. And you're right, we are younger. But man, my kid the other day just said, "Why are you turning white, Daddy?" It was just like, oh,
ooh.
All right. Yep.
All right. Thanks. And that's no TV for you tomorrow,
That's right. Well,
no, I hear you.
I really appreciate you taking the time, man. Before we get out of here, is there anything else you want to make sure the Cannabis Equipment News audience either knows about yourself or your work at Pioneer Interests?
No, I think, if you're ever in and around Colorado, please, try some of our flower, Natty Rems, or, our live concentrates. They're phenomenal. Golden Goat's one of my favorites. She's an absolute banger. I think, one of the things that Natty is known for is the truest expression of the actual plant itself, right? And it's nothing but Natty flower. So if you're buying Goat, if you're buying Super Lemon Haze, you're actually getting that true pheno, where there's so many others that just name their stuff because it's popular. Also shop at any one of our great retail locations at Lova. We've got some of the best selection at the best prices, and I think just again, one last shout out to the Colorado Clean Energy Office, specifically Libby and her team over there. Heather Braithwaite and Paul over at Colorado Clean Energy Fund, John Foley, Dan Rhoda, and Sunday Seafried over at Safe Harbor, as well as Sanat over at Patel over at Ivana. A lot of people who came together to bring the crop program to fruition, and I think it's a really exciting initiative that is available to any grower in Colorado right now to get some really reasonable funds at a great rate to help you accomplish what it is that you're seeking to accomplish out there.
No, it is exciting, and thank you again for taking the time. I really do appreciate it.
My pleasure. David, thank you so much, and hope to talk to you again soon.
All right, before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach me at david@cannabisequipmentnews.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. For Matthew Shifrin, CEO of Pioneer Interests, I'm David Manti. This is the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast, and we will see you next week.
Welcome to the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast.